So I think we're all here. So Josh, we've got Anthony Mitchell and Mark Baker from NTDC, and Tim Holder and David Peach from the Launceston Chamber of Commerce.
Excellent.
And thanks very much for the opportunity today to take some questions directly and have a chat directly to what are important stakeholders in Northern Tasmania about this year's budget.
Well, thank you very much, Bridget, and thank you guys for taking the time to join us on the call. You don't need me to tell you that Bridget Archer's a star. The peak of her public life was not Georgetown, the mayorship in Georgetown, nor being a farmer. It's being the member for Bass, and she's been a great friend and a great colleague, and it's been very important to bounce ideas off Bridget in the lead up to this budget. The budget was a very, very significant one, not just because of the size and the scale of the initiatives that were announced in it, but because of the context in which it was happening. I certainly didn't think that I'd be talking to you today after announcing the biggest debt and the biggest deficit in Australia's history. In fact, even after the fires and the flood and the drought, we were still on track for the first surplus in 12 years earlier this year, and then the pandemic hit. And Australia hasn't been immune. So many other countries have been hit even harder. Our response initially with JobKeeper and JobSeeker and the $750 payments and the cash flow boost helped save 700,000 jobs, and we were only able to undertake those initiatives because the economy was strong going into the crisis. But when the Prime Minister and I got to putting together the budget, we were very conscious of transitioning to the next phase, particularly off the JobKeeper program, but to get the unemployment rate down, because unemployment through the experience of previous recessions in Australia stays elevated for too long. So in the 1980s, it took 6 years to get unemployment back below 6% from where it started. And in the 1990s recession, it took a full decade to get unemployment back below the 6% from where it started. Also for young people, in the 1990s, it took 15 years to get that unemployment rate for young people down below from where it started, back to from where it started. So the initiatives in this budget are really all about jobs, and they're in three separate buckets. The first bucket is the tax cuts, and the good news is they've passed the Parliament, and so the ATO will now move to update the schedules, and that is amazing to get this legislation through in the same week that it was announced. It's really very, very significant. So the tax cuts are now LAW, as Paul Keating famously said, and that's going to help boost aggregate demand, and Treasury's forecast is that alone will help save 50,000, will help create 50,000 jobs. The second bucket of reforms is the focus on business, and in particular, trying to create investment incentives for business to bring forward investment, whether they're smaller or larger sized businesses. So the fact that you can immediately deduct those investments is very significant. We are also introducing that loss carry back measure, which will be very helpful to a lot of businesses who were otherwise profitable pre-COVID but are now turning a loss. They can carry that loss backwards against taxes and profits previously made and get a cash refund from the ATO. So that will be very, very helpful to them. And then we've also got infrastructure that's been brought forward. We've got a massive skills package around apprentices and so forth. So those measures are all designed to make it easier for business and to get them to invest, to hire and to grow. And then the third suite of measures is those that are designed to create an incentive for an employer to take on a young person, and that's the job maker hiring credit, which Treasury thinks will support around 450,000 young people. So if you're 16 to 35, you will get, and you've been on Job Seeker in one of the last 3 months, you will get, the business that takes you on will get either $100 a week or $200 a week over the course of a year. And we think that's going to be very helpful to getting young people off the unemployment queues and into work. So that's going to be important. So there's a lot in this budget. Obviously, unemployment peaks before the end of the year around 8%, and then steadily comes down to 7.25% next year, to 6.5% after that, to 6%, and then to 5.5%. There is more spending in this budget, but it's front-ended. 90% of our spending is over just 2 years. And then there is structural reform, changes to insolvency, changes to energy, changes to the provision of credit, the digital transformation stuff. These are all long-term structural reforms that are in place. So hopefully that's helpful in sort of giving an understanding of why we did what we did. And the good news is the tax cuts have now passed the Parliament today, and that will be putting more money into people's pockets in Tasmania. So thank you very much, Bridget.
Thanks, Josh. We did have a couple of questions come through from the guys in advance of the meeting. Chamber of Commerce, you had some questions about infrastructure spending.
Yes, I did. Good afternoon, Treasurer. It's David from the Launceston Chamber. The phrase was used during the delivery the other night that infrastructure spending was use it or lose it. There's been a fairly checkered history of the state government in Tasmania completing on infrastructure projects. My question was around what's the terms of the use it or lose it and the decision-making process about that?
So how it will work is we will reach a decision about which projects are going to be funded, and the use it or lose it applies to the $2 billion road safety initiatives, and these are shovel-ready projects that are not requiring big tier one contractors to undertake. These are, laying a new some new bitumen, putting some new barriers up on a road. These are all designed to be shovel-ready projects that can help stimulate the economic activity quickly, as well as create more safety. So we will reach an agreement with the states about an initial phase of projects that we will support, and the money will be provided on effectively a pro rata basis to each state. Then the state will have a matter of months to get that project underway. If the state does not have that project underway in the allotted time, then the next round of funding, the equivalent amount that they haven't spent will be deducted from what they would have got in the next round. And then that will be competitively bid for by other states. So we won't be taking the money away from them that would have otherwise been, because it was allotted for a particular project. But it means that they won't get their next round of funding because they haven't spent the initial round of funding. And that's going to lead to sort of effectively some competition between the states, but also more importantly than that, it's going to ensure that the work is undertaken quickly.
Thank you. In the number of projects that were announced on Tuesday night in that infrastructure spend, there's actually nothing in there for Northern Tasmania at all. Was there a consideration given to, there is for the Hobart region, but not for the north of Tasmania? Was there, it's a small number of large projects, was there any consideration given to a larger number of smaller projects to spread that around a little bit more equitably?
Well, as you know, I'm just trying to look up the exact projects that are here in northern Tasmania, but
there are some projects.
There are projects because there is already, firstly, a $100 billion pipeline that we've extended to a $110 billion pipeline. So there are projects, David, that are going right across the state of Tasmania, including northern Tasmania, under that existing pipeline. And there are, and like I say, that road safety projects is $2 billion, and there's $1 billion for local councils as well. So there'll be local councils in Tasmania, and there'll be local councils in northern Tasmania that will be benefiting from it. So that statement is wrong in fact.
I've got some further details. Sorry, Josh. I've got some further details on that, David, and I'm happy to stay on the line after Josh goes to fill you in a bit more detail on some of those.
Thank you.
I'd just like to add a little more to that specific line of questioning, that one of the great legacies of the Turnbull era were, I think, these incredibly sensible approaches to working with cities. And of course, the Launceston City Deal is an amazing long-sighted approach to the future, working with 3 tiers of government. Is there anything particularly new about that? I know there's a number of substantive projects, including City Heart Stage 2, that's important. These are very important projects as we look to make sure Launceston can transition to the future, that we have a competitive offering in terms of place, but also in terms of skilling up and all of those things associated with the university relocation. I'm just interested to hear how the City Deal process gets supported through this really substantive investment from the federal budget.
Did you want to talk to that, Bridget? Because obviously we've funded both the Hobart and the Launceston City Deals, as well as a number of others.
We've just had the obviously the 12-month report card on the Launceston City Deal just last week before I returned to Canberra. The Creative Precinct project has, of course, flowed into the City Deal as well. The funds that were committed for the Albert Hall redevelopment, the grant deed's been signed for that project, and from what I understand from City of Launceston, work will commence on that before the end of this year. Obviously, work's continuing in relation to the river processes. We're getting close on the Northern Suburbs hub. There's just some land environmental studies and things to be completed up there before work is able to get underway on that. So there's still a number of those projects, and of course we've got Defence Precinct and UTAS transformation as well ongoing. So
the blue economy, I may ask as well. That was another
CRC
important election.
Economy. Yeah. So those projects are actually underway already and have.
Could the chamber get a detailed update on all this? Because I think, for a whole bunch of very legitimate reasons, I'm sure it's on our side, but we feel a bit out of touch with where we're actually at. So yeah, that would be good.
Absolutely, happy to send through to you the report from last week. Yeah, which should give you quite a lot
on all the projects. Yeah,
that covers all the projects. Yeah.
I have another quick question, more at a national level for the Treasurer, if I may, and it's in the area of microeconomic reform and industrial relations. Are there any plans by the government to make any headway in this important area as we try and find our way back to the new normal?
Look, that's an important question because we do have these 5 work streams underway between employer and employee groups. Looking at everything from compliance to casuals to greenfield sites to ward simplification to enterprise agreements and how they're operating. So that work is underway and it's making progress, and we'll have more to say about that in due course. We did successfully make some industrial relations changes when we introduced JobKeeper. You may remember we were able to introduce legislation that said that where an employer and employee could reach agreement around change of duties or hours or location of work, then that would accompany the JobKeeper payment. And that's been pretty important to employers and having the flexibility. So if your cafe was closed, if your retail shop was closed or had less foot traffic because of COVID and you needed to deploy a shop front worker to the warehouse, then you had more flexibility to do that. So we're hopeful of being able to get through our broader industrial relations reforms, and that work is currently underway with the working groups, and we'll have more to say about that soon.
Josh, both the Chamber and NTDC had some questions around energy and future energy direction, and specifically in relation to hydrogen, I think. Would you like to make some comments?
Well, again, there are some hydrogen projects that are underway, and we're also, seeking to get more underway. I mean, one of them is in my state of Victoria that is out of the Latrobe Valley, and we're trying to use some of the existing coal deposits and try to generate hydrogen in this partnership with the Japanese on that. The energy opportunities obviously in Tasmania are very significant, and having visited there a number of times to talk about the second interconnector, the Marinus Link, and then also talk about tapping some of the wind assets in Tasmania are very important opportunities. So we've got that work underway. We've also got in the budget just over $1 billion extra for ARENA, as well as some other programs that we are undertaking. So we're sort of investing in renewables. We're pursuing our hydrogen strategy. We're focusing on research and development, and then we're also trying to advance the work on the Marinus Link between the mainland and Tasmania.
And got on the call, Josh. Yeah, I'll just you go.
I was just going to say,
there, Bridget. Yeah,
just on that. It perhaps might be useful for the Chamber and for NTDC for me to try and seek a similar type of meeting as this with Angus, so that he can give you more detail. That was a previous portfolio of yours, Josh, environment and energy.
I'm trying to forget it.
Yes, but perhaps we can get some more detailed assessment for you from Angus, Tim.
Well, obviously the competitive advantages that a first mover in Australia could have in a place like Launceston with a university are obvious. And as a business person, sometimes just being first can give you a sustained industry into the future with all the various sectoral support elements. So it would be great if we could make some progress there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Treasurer, if I could jump in, and Bridget, if that's okay, if I could jump in. On budget night, Treasurer, you talked about sovereign manufacturing, which I think is a real desire of the community. And you mentioned 6 areas, food and beverage, which I think Tassie has a competitive advantage, and recycling and clean energy, where we have that advantage as well. One of the 6 was defence, and I note that perhaps Tassie doesn't get its fair share of the defence spend. A lot of it's based on not having bases and whatnot. But I just wondered if in that defence research and development, if there was an opportunity there, particularly for Northern Tasmania. You can update us on that potential.
The specifics about defence opportunities in Tasmania, maybe Bridget will have more information at hand, but I can talk generally about the manufacturing strategy and how we're thinking about it. It's designed to pursue 3 objectives. The first is to align the interests of state governments, the federal government, and industry on priority areas where there's a comparative advantage, because this is not a cause for protectionism or for Australia to build everything here in Australia. That's not cost competitive, and it would be counterproductive. And so you talked about those areas: space industry, defence industry, food and agriculture, medical device products, clean energy, renewables, and so forth. The second objective is to get a focus on decreasing the cost of the inputs into manufacturing. And that's where energy and our gas strategy very much interlinks. That's where the $2 billion for research and development incentives are playing a key role. And so that's important. Obviously, the flexible workplaces reforms are very important. And then the third is to say, well, if there was to be another global shock, how do we become more independent and less reliant on global supply chains for certain things? So fuel security is a good example. So we're going to boost the diesel storage by 40%, and that will create a lot of jobs. We are looking at medical products. We're able to be pretty adaptable in this crisis, turning sleep apnea production lines into ventilators. We were able to, in Tasmania, you were able to turn gin distilleries into hand sanitizers, and in mask factories, we don't have many of them, but the ones we did, we were able to quickly upgrade their production lines and boost their output significantly. But we're sort of taking a comprehensive look at those supply chains that we need here in Australia, so that we are less dependent globally at a time of crises. So that's what the manufacturing strategy is about. There's $1.5 billion behind it. It's going to help the various growth centres. There's money in terms of grants. There's money for commercialisation of products and for setting up research and development centres and the like. But it's focused on those key particular areas. As for defence industry more generally, there's an unprecedented amount of money going into defence, and as for Tasmania, Bridget, do you want to shed some light on the specific defence opportunities in Tasmania?
Yeah, so we already have a commitment here in Northern Tasmania to the $30 million defence precinct at Newnham, and work is underway and continuing in relation to that project already. In relation to the manufacturing announcements in this budget, I think there are a range of opportunities for Northern Tasmania, and the logical one that comes to mind for me is, and I've had some discussions with my Senate colleagues already, Tasmanian Senate colleagues, around whether this might be the best yet opportunity that we've seen for something like Ferment Tas, for example, to get established. That would seem to be a good fit in terms of that agriculture, food manufacture space as well. Fuel storage is also potential opportunity for Bell Bay, for Northern Tasmania, and I know that there are a number of expressions of interest have gone in relation to that. So I think there are a lot of opportunities for Northern Tasmania in relation to the manufacturing side, and also energy and waste and recycling as well. I think that there's a large potential for Northern Tasmania in relation to the waste and recycling piece, particularly with the availability of clean energy as well.
Thanks, Bridget. Thanks, Treasurer.
May I ask a broader question? This country, indeed the world, Treasurer, has sort of taken a big step into Keynesian economics to effectively fund this difficult economic moment, and I do congratulate the government for the way it's handled Australia's affairs in that response, in that respect. And it was wonderful hearing from you, Treasurer, the other night, just by global standards, how well Australia is in fact travelling. The thing that I hear a lot from business people, and it's kind of like, it doesn't seem the immediate problem, but we're worried about it into the future. How do, with this huge amount of debt, how do we begin to start thinking about how that is actually going to get repaid? How do we ultimately get this under control and tamed so as our capacity to do things in the future isn't severely diminished?
Well, the first thing to say is the debt is manageable at this point in time. So right now, the interest bill on our debt, just over $17 billion, which is less than it was a couple of years ago. Even though our debt is higher, the interest bill is lower because the cash rate is very low. And we've been borrowing money at 3 years and 5 years and 10 years and even longer tenor bond issuances than that. And the borrowing rates are at historical lows, and my sense is that interest rates will remain low for some time. In terms of paying back the debt, ultimately, it's going to be by growing the economy. So if you can have trend growth, if you can start to stabilise the spending and you can grow the economy, then debt as a proportion of GDP will come down over time. And that's why we set out our fiscal strategy in two separate phases. The first phase was to allow what are called the automatic stabilisers, and they are the tax system and the welfare system, to just operate. So if your tax revenue is down, which ours is down very substantially, you're not chasing that by putting higher taxes. Far from it. You're leaving a commitment to lower taxes, but you're allowing those stabilisers to work. You're also introducing targeted and temporary responses, whether they are the measures we introduced in the budget or whether they are the JobKeeper payments and JobSeeker payments before. The goal is to get the unemployment rate, and I use the word comfortably below 6%, before we move to the second phase. Now, the comfortably below 6% is 5.5%, which is where the budget shows unemployment will be by mid-2024. And then you can move to the next stage, which is you take out that temporary, you're no longer pursuing that temporary and targeted response. You've got absolutely the same commitment to guaranteeing the essential services and not lifting taxes. But because the economy is starting to come back, you can start to stabilise your debt as a proportion of GDP and to come back over time. So the reality is the debt has increased, the deficit has increased, but as you alluded to, it's much lower in comparison to other comparable countries. And for Australia, it is manageable. And in recent days, the Moody's, Fitch and Standard & Poor's, the three leading credit rating agencies, talked positively about Australia's plan.
I think we're about to lose the Treasurer shortly, so I might just see if NTDC, did you have something else?
I was just going to ask a broader question, just briefly. First of all, Treasurer, congratulations on a very big and bold budget. Well done indeed. I just wondered very briefly whether there was an assumption in the budget about when the national border would reopen, because that clearly has an impact on the economy. And secondly, whether there was any consideration given for federal resources to help with the quarantine arrangements in the states to free up capacity to enable some more international travel.
Well, I mean, the states have taken on that responsibility, and obviously some have done it better than others. In terms of the assumptions in the budget, we assume that the state borders will lift by the end of the year, except for Western Australia, which will lift by April. We also make an assumption about a vaccine being widely available across the country at the end of next year. And we also make an assumption that international travel and international students will start very gradually over the course of next year and then into 2022 build up. Now, obviously, there's great uncertainty at this time about the economic climate, about the ability to find a vaccine, about whether there's going to be a second or a third wave. And there's also scenarios in the budget, for example, that if we saw another Victorian second wave that would cost $55 billion over 2 years. Likewise, if a vaccine is found 6 months earlier, then that could be a $34 billion benefit to the economy. So there are different scenarios in there, but it is very, very uncertain. But regardless of whether a vaccine is found or not, the policies that we have announced are the right ones at the right time, because we've got to get people back into jobs. And whether it's the hiring credit, whether it's the tax incentives for business, or whether it's the tax cuts, they're all designed to do that.
It sounds like the back end of next year for international travel.
Well, again, it's going to be only, Anthony, where it's COVID safe to do so. And that's the assumption, that's the working assumption we've got in our budget, that it will pick up, but very gradually over the course of next year.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Treasurer. And I know that you've got a series of these to be getting to. So thanks very much for the time that you've been able to give us this afternoon. I'll stay on the line with you, NTDC and Chamber, if you want to have some more follow-up with me after we leave the Treasurer.
Thank you very much, Bridget, for all your hard work. And thank you, Anthony, Mark, I think it's Tim there, and who have we lost?
David.
And David. Thank you, David. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for your time.
Bye-bye.
Treasurer, appreciate it.